Well, good morning, everyone, and for our guests, thank you for being here with us for our special meeting. Given that this is a work meeting or a workshop, or the exact wording escapes me, but there will not be any formal votes. But this is an opportunity for us to once again hear from folks about the ESA handbook and hear from department staff on same topic. So I will call this meeting to order at 9:08. And Executive Director Ross, will you take roll for us?
Thank you, President Core. Vice President Haley.
Present.
Superintendent Horn.
Here.
Member Katniss.
Who's
Member Clark. Dr. Clay.
here?
Dr. Hagerman.
Present.
Member Kripkus.
Here.
Member Myerson. Dr. Robbins. President Core, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Then I'll just get us started right with the call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on the FY24 ESA handbook. Members of the board, of course, may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38431.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and a decision at a later date. Meaning, we are absolutely here to hear from you, but will not respond directly to your comments, but we do want to hear from you. So this is, in fact, the time for the public to comment on the FY24 ESA handbook. I believe we've got approximately 25 speakers, so I'm going to ask you to limit your comments to 2 minutes. Director Ross, I'm quite certain we have received requests to speak, so how would you like to proceed?
President Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. First is Melissa Gardner, followed by Susanna Anderson, and then Jennifer Fritz.
Good morning. My name is Melissa Gardner, and 9 days ago, my husband and I made the difficult decision to unenroll our special needs daughter from public school education. 2 days later, we officially signed our ESA contract and became a member of this new world that we are trying to navigate. My comments today are based off of the 7 days of experience that I have at this point with the ESA. And it's not even necessarily towards the handbook, it is about the website. So as, again, someone who is new to this, the first thing that I've noticed is that there are different links within the main ESA page that if you click on them, they give you contradicting information. So I don't have a history of 5-10 years in this program. So for me, it's very difficult to try to decipher, okay, these are allowable under the handbook. Over here, it says it's allowed. This one says allowed, and nothing matches up. So it's a very confusing place to be as a new parent. Second, I did notice there's an ESA advisory committee. As of Monday, I have been checking that over the past week. There were no names listed. It came up with an error message when you clicked it that said, you do not have permission to view this content. Tuesday, the names populated with no other information on how they were chosen, how long they've been in the program. And my recommendation would be to make sure that there is a variety of people at different levels in the program. So fresh eyes, someone to come in and say, hey, I clicked these links because I really am trying to search for myself and I cannot find the correct answers. There also seems to be almost a backlog of information that's been sent out through emails from what I've been told from other parents over the past 6 months. Things that I am not privy to, but they're like, oh, this was disallowed when they explained it. And I'm like, well, there's nothing on the site that explains this. So a little bit more, maybe an audit of the Department of Education website would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Susanna Anderson, followed by Jennifer Fritz, and then Sandra Kirby.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Thank you, Superintendent, for taking this program seriously. I am here today in full support of the handbook draft. The handbook has been criticized or language in it being vague. Some of the examples that were given, that reasonable educational expense, or terms such as large and small, proportionate to the student size, are confusing. I submit to you that the fact that the handbook we currently have is severely outdated is far more confusing for parents. The current handbook does not reflect the law, as it changed almost a year ago. And in the current outdated handbook, there are items specifically disallowed, such as laptops, tablets, headphones, printers, school supplies, things that are of clear educational value. And these are, in the current handbook, specifically disallowed. So while we are expected to dismiss this draft and continue arguing about the wording for items such as large chicken coops and things like that, which are of a secondary educational nature, we are supposed to continue with this severely outdated handbook that we are currently using. Now, the parents that are criticizing the draft of this handbook as being too vague do understand the value of open-ended wording. And you will see this, and when it comes to students' IEPs, if the IEP says that sensory items should be allowed, these parents say, and I agree with them, that such a definition should suffice when a parent then puts in a request for a purchase of an item that they consider a sensory need, that it shouldn't have to be spelled out exactly on their child's IEP. Okay, this is for a fidget spinner or a puppet or some other item. There is a clear value in wording being open-ended, and these parents recognize that. I appreciate that the current administration realizes that home educators are reasonable and have common sense, and there are benefits to having items spelled out specifically, but there's also the drawback that it provides a ceiling. It kind of limits us in what we can explain that our student has a unique need. And therefore, I truly appreciate the common sense approach and the open-ended wording, as these parents realize in other venues as well. Therefore, I urge you not to reject this handbook draft. This new handbook is long overdue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next is Jennifer Phillips, followed by Sandra Kirkby, and then Jay Griffin.
Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I'm a homeschooling mom of 5, soon to be 6 children. I was previously a research scientist in biotechnology and managed up to 150 staff at times after experiencing rapid expansion. I was also on the receiving end of countless audits for both state and federal agencies. Because of this experience, I could put myself in the shoes of Mr. Curso and the new administration. I can see the big picture that preservation of the universal ESA program is of utmost importance. This needs to be the priority so that all Arizona children can have access to this program in the future. It is obvious to me that the edits to the current handbook aim to make this program bulletproof from a legal perspective. It's quite remarkable in that it also actually gives more flexibility to parents in how they choose to educate. Having written many manuals, protocols, and procedures myself, I can tell you there is an art to writing these things in such a way that will satisfy an auditor while still providing flexibility to the user. I'm impressed with Ms. Curso's work on the handbook, and she exhibits a degree of competency I wouldn't even expect from someone so new to a position. Another important factor is maintaining this program is making it administratively manageable. This can be a painful process for participants in the program, as we see with the elimination of the debit card. We need to trust Mr. Curso on some of these changes she must make to accommodate 50,000 plus participants. After the program is made manageable, we can advocate to bring back the debit cards in a way that is feasible for the administration and the user. I humbly request that in deciding to accept or reject this draft of the handbook, that the board and the program participants keep the big picture in mind. We want to make this program legally bulletproof and administratively viable so that future children have access to the program. Once this is accomplished, we can address matters inconsequential to the bigger picture, such as allowing large trampolines, chicken coops, further defining family consumption and curriculum, etc., and most of the other repeated criticisms of the current draft. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sandra Kirkby, followed by Jay Griffin, and then Kathy Visser.
Sandra? No, not here.
So up next is Jay Griffin,
He's not here either.
Kathy Visser,
President, Core, and members of the board. My name is Kathy Visser. I'm a parent of 2 ESA recipients and have been participating in the program since its inception since 2011. I'm also certified to teach in Arizona. I have a long background at education. Parents here are here because we want to help with this process. In the future, I'd like to see the PAC and the possibility, maybe even an additional team of parents tasked to go through the handbook and make recommendations as well. I know it was, there's some tight timelines this year that hopefully won't be again. We use this program, know where the parts of the program are not working, and also have experience to know what wording is bound to confuse parents as they try to navigate the program. We're asking for changes to this current draft, which I appreciate the changes that have already been made, because I think there's just big difference. But we still have some work to do. The process of working through the handbook approval is one of the most important tasks the department has. It's going to save thousands and thousands of hours of staff time down the road with questions that don't need to be answered. It's going to save thousands and thousands of hours on the volunteer side of the parents who help. I also help admin one of the large support groups on Facebook, and I have a lot of experience with when the handbook doesn't work, all the confusion it causes. And we need to take the time, even if we have to extend the deadlines, to get this right, so we don't have inconsistencies in the handbook. We had a few this year that could be. We also need to consider being able to update the handbook sooner when legal changes are made, and at least make it a sooner draft. I don't think parents were against having the handbook updated mid-year if it was going to eliminate confusion. Where we were having an issue is we were getting handbook drafts that were being updated. It wasn't clear anywhere that it was updated, and then we were being charged with misspending against rules that were not in place at the time we made purchases. That is why this is so important, and a lot of people that haven't been on the program for a long time do not see that history. I think the history of it is very important. I'd like to make some more notes that I have not turned in yet on that aspect, but I
Thank you.
really appreciate everybody taking the time, and Member Clark's notes are excellent, and we fix most of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
President Core, Superintendent Warren, members of the board. Up next is Lynn Fox Emery, followed by Colleen May.
Good morning, members of the board.
Good morning.
I'm a parent of 3 children currently in the ESA program. And I have like 7 pages of notes for you guys, but I've also sent them in. So I'm just gonna just talk on what really bothers me with this current handbook. Clarity. As a parent who's been on the program since 2016, with all of the changes in the emails week after week, I think it's caused a lot of confusion. One thing that I'm hoping will happen in the future is that when laws change, we do get an update on the law only, not a rewrite of the handbook mid-year. I think that's confusing to all families. My biggest concern, I have a couple big concerns, special needs kids. 2 out of my 3 children are qualified under special needs on this program. I feel like my hands are tied. I feel like even though some people are saying that we're opening up so we can buy more things, I think some parents are just afraid to purchase because what if they make the wrong decision? So I think that the database help parents in that situation, that they could feel, oh, this is a safe purchase, 99, hopefully I don't have to pay this back. You know, the other is the debit card. I personally do not use debit cards, but I know there's a lot of families that do, and those families should have the opportunity to do that. I understand it's a headache for the department. We've heard it all over the place. It's a problem. Go back to the old BFA system. We had to upload all of our receipts. They had to be approved at the end of the quarter before you got the next quarter's funding. So if you want to hold parents accountable, let's hold them accountable. Let's say to them, you use your debit card, you upload your receipt, have someone from the staff review it like we did in the past, and then you get your funding. You don't turn in your paperwork, you don't get your funding. You know, I think that's accountability. Taking away the debit card is a nightmare. You know, I know there was a statement made at the last meeting about all the other states that don't have debit card. I don't care what's happening in the other states. I care about what's happening in Arizona. And I do believe in school choice, but I do believe we need to phase in the new universal children until we fix these problems. There's 50,000 account holders right now, and I'm still waiting to get reimbursements. So I'm just asking you to look at my 7-page document that I sent you guys earlier, because I think this is very important.
Thank you.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Colleen May. She is our last in-person speaker. We will then have switch to virtual, which will be Kirsten Galindo, followed by Sarah.
Morning.
Good morning.
The handbook plays a critical role in shaping the education of Arizona students. I am here today to request open and equitable access to ESA funding for all students, including those who are economically disadvantaged and those with complex learning attributes. Arizona's ESA program is innovative. We have a fantastic opportunity here to support and develop creative thinkers for a modern and changing world. We have stepped up and demonstrated to the nation that education is not one size fits all, and this program should not be retooled and constrained as such. The current administration has indicated that debit cards will no longer be issued. New students entering the program are being denied the most portable method of accessing their ESAs. Neurodiverse learners often rely on non-traditional services, many of which are costly and place an undue financial burden on families who are denied access to debit cards through no fault of their own. Our children should not be held back by the subjective application of bureaucratic red tape. With educational flexibility built into this program, we can support our future innovators, creatives, inventors, and leaders. Why is the messaging about parents seemingly so negative? Efforts being focused on a hotline to point fingers at public school teachers. Media interviews conducted pointing fingers at ESA parents, most of whom are honest, hardworking, and dedicated to helping our students achieve their greatest potential. Instead of vilifying groups, how about spending some of that time to educate the community at large about the successes of non-traditional learning methods for SPED students? Why is there so much focus on the optics of unconventional learning methods to outside critics? What about the optics to our own ESA families of editing a handbook with the assistance from a special interest group? One day, after all of us have moved on from this meeting, the legacy of this handbook and its effects on our students' educational careers will remain. Arizona is a trailblazer in school choice. ESA has created incredible success stories. Let's keep that momentum. Remove the newly invented and burdensome constraints on economically disadvantaged and special education members. Let's give our students the access and tools they need to become Arizona's future leaders.
Thank you.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. We're now switching to virtual speakers. We have Sarah Blank, Kirsten Galindo, followed by Sarah Blank, and then Andrea McIntosh.
Executive Director Ross, Kirsten Galindo is not joining the meeting yet. I'll let you know when we do.
Thanks, Jessica. So Sarah Blank.
She's joining the meeting.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. Good morning, President Corr, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board. Thank you for setting up the special meeting and giving ESA parents an opportunity to provide feedback. Please reject the draft handbook. I am concerned that it does not adequately guide parents or provide them with essential information. Program policies must be consistent. They should be all in one place in writing. Without clear and consistent information, parents are unable to effectively educate their students. Inconsistent and inaccurate information is particularly detrimental for students with disabilities who have diverse and often higher needs. The current handbook states that for associated goods, assistive technology, and services, account holders must provide the department with one of the following: documentation of the student being enrolled in a special education course of study, provide the most current IEP MET 504 plan or evaluation, or provide a letter from a qualified special education service provider indicating the need for a good or service. It is imperative that all three of these are included in the handbook and followed by ADE for students with disabilities. Not all students have exhaustive IEP, MET, or evaluations. ESA students do not update these documents, and their associated good needs change with time. These items are also listed in statute and rule, so the letter by SPED professionals should always remain in the handbook. No one knows special education needs better than current providers such as certified teachers, SLPs, and OTs. They are able to provide individualized recommendations and resources. Lastly, I would like to say that I appreciate your time. Thank you for your support of all Arizona students. I know that each of you are busy professionals. As a special needs parent, I understand that time is precious. It is my hope that parents are provided with a clear, comprehensive handbook so that we can get back to the important work of educating our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Andrea McIntosh, followed by Bryson McIntosh, and then Rebecca Cross.
Can you hear me?
We can, please go ahead.
Okay. I want to thank you guys again for having the meeting today. I appreciate it. Pardon my voice. I heard Christina Curso's sob story at a recent meeting regarding the little time she had to create the draft handbook and why she resulted to clerical help from AFC. I have to say I'm disgusted that she would say such a thing, and she would be so disrespectful to every ESA parent, every ESA student, the SBE, and every taxpayer in Arizona. She's wasting the time and money for her own gain. Parents are not paid to write the handbook or edit it. Christina Curso is. It is her job. Instead of working on editing the handbook and following the suggestions set forth by the board in the last meeting, as well as the 1,000+ pages of suggestions given by parents, Christina Curso chose to again slough off her responsibilities, and instead she attended.
Please try not to make this personal. Just let us know your thoughts, and I'd like us to refrain from personally attacking any individual. But please do.
I'm sorry.
Please continue. Please continue.
Okay, can I have time added back onto my time,
Sure, please continue.
Well, the reason I was stating all of that is because she was in Tucson at a speaking engagement rather than turning in the handbook. This wouldn't have been an issue if the draft handbook had been in fact completed in January, as she mentioned in the SBE meeting. She did tell you guys in January at the SBE meeting that the draft handbook was ready when you guys were talking about the rules. Parents have again only had minimal time to draft letters and give feedback to the draft handbook. I ask that you refuse this draft of the handbook and require documented parent feedback, as well as make sure it is complete and within the legal limits, as well as I again request that it go on record that I fear retaliation from the department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Bryson McIntosh.
Sure.
My son is not available as he's quite sick.
I'm sorry to hear that. Give our best to Bryson.
All right, thank you very much.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Rebecca Cross, followed by Joy Kay, and then Allison Lewis.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As I mentioned each month, this is our 5th year in the program, and this year I have 3 ESA students and one who is very excited to finally be old enough next year when he starts kindergarten. My request to you today is simple. The handbook needs to be done right. The director's already disregarded the deadline, so we can't just rush and push it through as though it has to be done on time. We need to get it correctly done. We needed to follow the rules. SV spent so much time in 2020 working on the rules, and we need those to be followed. The curriculum and supplemental items must follow the rules. Formal curriculum with a scope and sequence is not required by law, and it is restrictive. SBE rules say that if it enhances or enriches, that it's allowed per SBE rule. I still am going back and forth with the department, getting instruments denied. They are citing statute to me, but they just tell me to read the statute, send it back. And I said, it doesn't say I have to have a class and curriculum. I don't have to have these things that you're saying. Please show me where it's saying it. We need everything spelled out correctly to hold the departments accountable and for our kids to get the education that they deserve. We need the database as required by the rules. This will help. It will reduce the calls. It will reduce the help desk tickets that they aren't honestly answering. They just give us a copy and paste thing and send it back. But we need those different things included in the handbook so parents know their rights and to keep the administration from making up all these things mid-year. For the students with disabilities, this is especially critical. Many of them are not following a formal scope and sequence, and it's a big advantage to ESA and home educating is being able to meet them in the way that they need to have their educational needs met. I'm just asking you to not accept the handbook as it is and to go through and make the necessary changes. Please take the time to read all the comments that we submitted. We had very little time to look at the handbook. It was sent out on a Friday. It wasn't sent out. It was published on a Friday night. We had to find it, go through it, and get all of our comments in by Tuesday. Multiple times we've done this. So please just take the time to read our comments and think about the students that this impacts. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Rebecca.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Joy Kay, followed by Allison Wilkes, and then
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, Joy. Thanks for joining us. Please go ahead.
Thank you. We need consistency. Already with the new allowables list, parents are getting different answers depending on who they talk to. I personally called in to double check if a basketball and hoop are considered sports equipment not needing documentation. I assumed since I see basketball courts on every school playground, this would be a no-brainer. One of those, if you see it in a school, you can buy it type of purchases that we are constantly told about. But I wanted to check just in case. I'm glad I did. I was told I needed curriculum in order to purchase. That's not what this list says. However, a week later, another ESA parent was told balls, hoops, and goals are considered sports equipment. Which is the correct answer? How many other parents have been told conflicting information? This is why it's imperative that the allowable expenses database is returned to the website. It not only makes it easier for parents, but it will also help ESA staff make consistent determinations when asked. Actually, the asking will dwindle when we have a database to check ourselves, which would then free up staff time for more important tasks, like processing a backlog of associated good requests, processing applications, fixing all sorts of help desk issues that don't seem to be getting to the director's desk. I ask again that you hold the ESA department to the rules set by you and insist they put the allowable expenses database back online. If the prior administration was able to do this, I can't see why this administrator can't as well. I also ask that you reject this draft handbook until all the concerns brought up by parents today are addressed. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Joy.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Allison Wilkes, followed by Kelly, no last name given, and then Tanya Rayner.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can, Allison. Thanks for joining us. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, President Corr and board members. As always, I'm very grateful for your service to Arizona students of all shapes, colors, size, and ability. It's wonderful that in this state we can support them by thinking outside the box. I have children in both public school and ESA, and it's been very difficult to balance my time in advocating for both. In 7 years in the ESA program, this has been the most difficult handbook season of them all. There's been little time given to review changes and provide feedback to the overextensive changes proposed, and coupled with the fact that the draft seems to be a completely new version every submission, it's making it cumbersome to fact check. I understand the ESA director stated she feels that, quote, changes must be substantial because the law change was substantial. However, things like removing financial information, the help desk process information, and special education therapies are not necessary changes. In fact, many of those changes appear ableist to special education students, as they disproportionately affect those students and families. The changes are so voluminous from beginning to end that it's easy for both parents and the board to miss important things. SBE has many advisory committees such as hiring, ESA rules, K-12 literacy, and special education panel, to name a few. I'd like to propose that moving forward, the SBE form an ESA handbook advisory committee. A committee to go through the ADE proposed changes line by line would save everyone a lot of time and stress. ADE would still be in control of what's written in the draft, as it's their administrative duty, but this way nothing gets missed, like things like ADE adding in-state to private secondary college tuition, which contradicts the statute, a statute that had no changes and therefore needed no new interpretations in the handbook. Please, I understand you're not going to reject this today. I was going to ask that you reject it, but what I ask is that you take your time and don't rush in April to approve whatever is put before you. We would rather this play out and get the right handbook in place and not have you guys be rushed to approve whatever gets put before you in April. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ellison.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Kelly, followed by Tanya Rayner, and then Kirsten Galindo.
Executive Director Ross Kelly is not joining the meeting.
Thanks, Jessica. Up next is Tanya Rayner, followed by Kirsten Galindo, and then Coco Lovejoy.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, Tanya, please go ahead.
Thank you. I continue to be shocked and appalled at this particular situation regarding the parent handbook. This is a crucial document that's far more important than the director visiting various locations throughout the state to speak about the ESA program. Parents are tired of advocating for what seems to be very clear statutes and rules that need to be included in this handbook. I had prepared a written statement and I'm not even following it. It is just so unprofessional and disconcerting that this situation continues. Basically, in administering the ESA program, the Arizona Department of Education continues to engage in programmatic abuse. This is seen as the chaotic communication from the department, inconsistencies, failure to conform the program and handbook to statutes and rules. It truly amounts to crazy making. ADE is in contract with parents and guardians for more than 50,000 scholarships, but continues to fail its own contractual obligations. Back in February, I was in contact with the Horn administration through one of Superintendent Horn's staff members, Ed Cota, who said that we want to make this program work for everyone, but it doesn't work for everyone. And I request that this handbook be revised in accordance with the law.
Thank you.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Kirsten Galindo, then Coco Lovejoy, and then Carrie Johnson.
Good morning, members of the board. Can you hear me?
We can, Kirsten. Thanks for joining us. Please go ahead.
Okay. I really wanted to ask the board to please urge the administration, the ESA administration, to form a committee that has a diverse representation of parents to help advise them as they are creating this new draft. I feel that the draft that's come out is not taking into account the many diverse situations that parents and families find themselves in. And so it can't really account for the diverse needs of the students that are part of this program. I did send in a written comment about the items that have been disallowed in this handbook that could be part of a legitimate educational program for students with specific needs or aptitude. And I really think that this administration is just not going to be capable of creating a handbook that is going to work for everyone unless everyone's voice is heard. I think that if the administration was able to hear the stories of parents who have used some of these disallowed items, such as trampolines, barbecues, bounce houses, even baby grand pianos, they might have a new perspective of how these things can be used. My concern is that when we have these kinds of items that could be legitimately educational on this list, that it opens this program up to kind of snowball into creating, into losing the flexibility that it needs to allow for out-of-the-box education strategies that are going to meet the needs of the diverse students who are part of this program. So please, I urge the board to encourage the administration to seek the input of parents as they are creating this new draft of the handbook. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Coco Lovejoy, followed by Carrie Johnson, and then Michelle McLaren.
Executive Director Ross, Coco Lovejoy, and Carrie Johnson have not joined the meeting yet.
Thanks, Jessica. So Michelle McLaren, followed by Valia Aguirre, and then Kathy Bowles.
Hello.
Hi, Michelle. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, board members and President Corr. On behalf of the small minority of home-educated disabled children, I urge you to reject this draft. Arbitrary and time-consuming policies are placing a huge burden on the families of home-educated disabled children. Their educational and emotional well-being is at risk. In spite of the board's voiced concerns, these parents had no representation in the drafting of the handbook. The administration's unwavering focus on streamlining the program caters only to the needs of fortunate non-disabled students, most who attend private and qualified schools. Arizona's ESA is the model for the rest of the country. I hope the board will require the administration to create a model that prioritizes and upholds the rights of home-educated disabled children, not one that pushes them aside for convenience. The program is under significant changes due to the large influx of universal students. It is essential the handbook safeguard the right for these children to obtain an equitable education and to prevent discrimination against this minority. I ask the board to request Director Accurso accept the help offered by ESA veteran parents who have worked with this board for years, parents that represent a wide spectrum of disabled children who home educate. Furthermore, it is clear a separate division is needed, headed by a qualified special ed expert that has the knowledge and insight as to why schools and curriculums have failed these children, an expert well-versed in current research on home educating disabled children. This expert needs to review appeals from this minority. They understand IEP's broad-based foundation and importance of collaborating with parents who know their child's needs best. They can examine and approve requests that may be questioned by uneducated laymen. This would safeguard the program, prevent auditors from questioning purchases, and curtail the unfair criticism currently directed at this minority. Arizona is the epicenter of an epic shift in U.S. education. Historians will study the effect of your decisions on the rest of the country. I would hope Arizona would be remembered as a state that set the standard for equitable education for home-educated disabled children. Please reject this draft. Thank you.
Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Valia Aguirre, followed by Kathy Bowles, and then Danielle Thomas.
Executive Director Ross, Valia Aguirre is not joining the meeting.
Thanks, Jessica. So Kathy Bowles, followed by Danielle Thomas, and then Jen Weed.
Hello, can you hear me and see me?
We can both hear you and see you. Thanks for joining us. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. President Corr, Superintendent Horn, and members of the State Board reject this handbook and continue to reject it until it aligns with the rules that have been so carefully written by the State Board of Education. The pushing of high school diplomas is a push to disenfranchise education that meets individual needs, and instead shove all ESA students into ESA qualified schools. This confusion needs to be removed from the handbook around attesting for everything. Accept credentials, including college degrees. Degrees do not come from accrediting organizations, but from accredited organizations, such as the University of Arizona in Tucson and Arizona Western College in Yuma, whose esteemed presidents are members of this board. The confusion around these terms, accredit, credential, degree, reflects the lack of knowledge of education by the political appointees who are now administering the ESA program. I'm appalled, like so many others, by how disrespectfully the ESA handbook process has happened this year. No public input was accepted. ADE has held 0 public meetings about the handbook, none. The draft and the public comments were each rushed in only 3.5 days, several times now. The draft had been revised by the Arizona Implementation Director of the Special Interest Group, American Federation for Children, who is pushing for qualified schools. Once this draft is rejected, then SBE members and the public will need to review yet another draft again. This is appallingly unprofessional. I'm shocked by the repeated ableism shown by the current ESA administration and their lack of special education knowledge. Why are associated goods at the back of the line for approvals? Why are help desk tickets, especially for special education students with complex needs, now waiting since January for answers? These students and their parents deserve far better than this ableist administration. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
President Court, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we have Danielle Thomas, followed by Jen Weaver.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Danielle. Thank you. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm here today to discuss the proposed draft. The current draft is outdated, as we all know, and definitely needs to be updated, but the proposed handbook needs a lot more work. And I love the idea of a parent committee. Just a few things I wanted to note was on page 21, it talks about other items regarding subscriptions. It says may be purchased for 1 year from the date of purchase only, and talks about not providing new content beyond the term of the contract year. So my question, can we not purchase a 3-month subscription? If we purchase a 1-year subscription in May, will that be disallowed? Can we only purchase a 1 year in July? Page 26, parents are directed to email their children's medical information to an unsecure email address rather than submitting it through a portal. Asking us to email this information should not be appropriate. Yet on page 35, it states to submit it in a help desk ticket, which is correct. These are just a few of the inconsistencies that I found in the short time I had to review this current proposed draft. I also submitted a lot of this in the survey and through other emails, yet none of these changes seem to have been made. So I'm not sure where this is all going. I would also like to mention that debit cards need to be provided for all families, as well as requesting that the searchable allowable database be reinstated. Removing that database and making things so vague in this handbook has allowed the current ESA administration to pick and choose who and what they want to approve. We also need to be allowed to utilize pre-approvals from others. The way it is now, one person is told yes, someone else is told no. There are even parents being told different things for each of their children. How is this possible? When you make parents repeat pre-approvals and add in the long wait times, our children are missing out on so much schooling and learning opportunities. We're being pushed to use the call center, yet even then we're told different things depending on who you speak to. And these are all verbal with no protection for our children's accounts. We want to do right, but the way things are is honestly scary as a new parent. I don't want to mess up with my children's funds, so this handbook needs to be a lifeline for us all. We need accountability, transparency, and clarity. Thank you so much for your time and all your effort on this.
Thank you, Danielle.
President Court, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, our final speaker for call to the public is Jen Weimer.
Hello. I'm not too sure if you can hear me. When I was
Jen, we can hear you. Please.
the captions were turned off and also the audio. If someone could confirm, specifically anyone on the SBE camera, by raising their hand, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Sorry. First of all, I am hard of hearing, so please let me know if you're having trouble understanding me by raising your hand. Thank you for holding this meeting, allowing every steward to express their opinion and concerns, no matter how long they've been in the program. And kudos to Melissa Gardner. I appreciate sections have been returned to this draft that were removed from the first, such as sped therapies and the statutes and laws. That being said, I ask that you reject this draft as well for the following reasons, among others, which I don't have enough time on the clock to address. I specifically requested to go last to be able to address what may not have been addressed by other stewards. I agree with many of the concerns brought up so far. One of my greatest concerns is that in the handbook, the help desk section seems to have been removed in certain parts. The help desk section is there to hold the administration accountable to replying within a timely manner. And the handbook, the old and the new, both of them say within 3 to 5 days. Unfortunately, a lot of us have help desk tickets that have not even been assigned, that have been in the queue for 60 days. I find the help desk extremely helpful since it is difficult to carry on a phone conversation, and it is easy to misunderstand what it's saying, even if just one syllable is missing. So by having it written and having a record of what was said, it is much easier for the stewards to comply with the laws and rules that have been set forth by SBE and ADE. There are many other concerns I have, but if you would like, I can submit those written instead, since there is not enough time. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our concerns.
Thank you, Jen.
President Core, Superintendent, members of the board, we can also have staff reach out to Ms. Weimer directly via email to get her thoughts and share those with the board as well.
Thank you, that'd be great. Did anyone who wasn't on the phone earlier or scheduled to speak arrive late at all before I move on?
President Core, nobody was joining the meeting virtually to speak, and I asked our receptionist to check for Sandra Kirkby and Jane Murphy, and they're not on the third floor, so we're good.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate everyone who's taking the time to share their thoughts with us. I know they are tremendously valued by each member of this board. And I appreciate everyone taking time to share those comments. As was referenced in a number of comments, this board received over 200 pages of public comment. This was on top of the almost 600 pages, or maybe more than 600 pages that we received for our earlier meeting. So again, thank you for sharing those thoughts. They impact us, I can assure you that. And want to thank everyone, especially the little ones who came out to spend some time with us today. Remarkably well behaved, and I'm not sure we put on quite the show for them. So they probably want to be elsewhere, but I appreciate their presence here. And I'll move us on and move us on to what is deemed the consent agenda, but it's for information only. Again, and no votes will be taken. So Executive Director Ross.
Superintendent Horn, Vice President Haley, members of the board. With us today, we have Christina Curso from the Arizona Department of Education to provide an update on the FY24 ESA.
Great. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Dr. Core, I'm going to try to use my notebook here. Dr. Core, members of the board, thank you so much for this time. I'm finally glad that I can come to address our handbook, because I've only been able to answer a couple of questions here or there. So this will have a lot of notes to be able to share with you. First and foremost, I want you to know that everything that our office has received, we have read everything, and I will be speaking to a lot of those comments. First, I'm going to address just kind of one topic at a time. from some of the comments in the previous board meetings, as well as some of the comments that were written for this board meeting as well. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Obviously, there's a lot of growing pains going from 13,000 students to 50,000 students. Every single student in the ESA program is valued equally and is important to all of our staff. Last board meeting, it was brought up about the class wallet information to restore that into the handbook, and we did. And it was restored exactly the way it was before. One of the actions that we took right after the previous board meeting was to go back to the original again, the one from last year that you approved, and then rather than make changes, go back to the original and just do the things that we needed to do to bring clarity and to also incorporate what you wanted into the handbook. Some of my comments are long regarding things, so I just want to go one topic at a time. Regarding the concern that documentation are needed for students with disabilities in order to purchase a good or service. This is not new. The handbook that the board approved last April stated the following for associated goods and assistive technology. Account holders who are seeking to use ESA funds, I'm quoting now, for an associated good, assistive technology. One, has to provide one of the following. One, documentation of the student being enrolled in a special education course of study, service, or educational needs with which a good or service is associated with. Or provide the most current IEP MET 504 plan or evaluation which indicates the need for a better service, or provide a letter from a qualified special education provider indicating the need for the good or service. Those are not things our administration changed, made up, or adjusted. Those are the exact words of the current handbook from the board. The one change, because the law changed, was to provide a letter from a qualified special education service provider. I also added a qualified examiner because the new legislation says that a letter can come from a qualified examiner for an evaluation. So we thought appropriate, if that evaluation obviously is something that was presented, that we would accept that as well. So we didn't change, we increased what is available. The important part of this is to understand, and I am a mom with a student with an IEP.
Could you speak a little closer to the microphone? I'm seeing some folks in the back asking to. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
I think Christina, if you talk a little slower, we'll understand better.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm a faster, sorry. So for assistive goods associated goods and assistive technology, it is important to note that everything that's in the handbook now was what was in the handbook when you approved it. So when people are making comments that not everything's on an IEP, I totally understand that as a mom with a son with an IEP. But there are IEPs, and I've reviewed dozens and dozens of them in the department, where items are on the IEP in general terms, sensory items, not necessarily the actual item itself, of course, would be absolutely accepted either way. So I'm not changing what is being asked of for those students with disabilities, just keeping it the same. The way we've been communicating about it, though, seems to have been caused issues. So I went back to the staff and found that sometimes this was not enforced in previous years, so it might sound really new, but this is something that we're keeping from your previous handbook. As for curriculum, the wording that we have made use may be confusing, so I want to make sure it's clear. And a change that we made. First, instead of a parent providing proof of enrollment in a class, or instead of a home educating parent sending an attestation in, we have decided to put a note right next to the submit button inside of Class Wallet that states with every purchase, and I quote, "By submitting an expense, you are attesting that it is for your individual student's education pursuant to ARS 15-2402, end quote. We hear from account holders every single day that they have not read the law or the contract that they signed. In public meetings, this question came up at least twice in our public meetings, asking for me to prove how this money is supposed to be used for an individual, not a family. So we had to clarify these are for individual students. This happens every day. This is the distinction we're trying to push. I currently have an investigator that researches claims that point to inappropriate use of fraud. He is talking to people every day, and those account holders tell him every day, I didn't read the law, and I didn't read the contract I signed. They are happy to return the money and do immediately, or things that they just didn't know. So I don't want you to think that we're taking a punitive approach. We're trying to take an educational approach to those who aren't understanding that. Now, I know everybody in this room, everybody is online and submitted comments, absolutely are fully aware of their contract and law. That's for sure. But now that we have over 51,000 students in the program, we're trying to train as we go without a punitive approach. Our communications are absolutely not meant to criticize, but to clarify. The program has grown quickly. We're doing what we can to keep up with what's going on and in the right direction. Supplemental materials were not removed from the list. They were clarified and we changed the name from educational materials to supplemental materials, and here's why. Even though this program is intended for educational purposes, we're trying to match the wording from the law and the rules that best matches up. We want to match how we talk about things and the way the law and the rules talk about that. So the law states that you can use funds for curricula and supplemental materials. So we moved to using supplemental materials as the category. There are many supplemental materials that would never require documentation because they're very well known to be educational materials. The supplemental materials that would require documentation are the items that are not typically known to be an educational related. An example of this I presented to you last time. And I also have another one, would be for like a culinary class. A parent would provide a curriculum, or we are now, for the first time that I know of, allowing home educators to be able to write their own curriculum, explains the overview of the class and what will be taught. In that curriculum, the materials list would be also in there, also documented. So home educating parents are now able to submit that, which we want to continue to do. So to speak to another point that was made at the last meeting regarding the definition of curriculum, it may be that it was the way it was communicated, but we are looking for the course of study that is the curriculum. And inside that course of study, it would tell us the overview and what's being taught. In the education world, that's called scope and sequence. I use educational terms from educators and administrators at the department. We can use easier terms like overview and what's being taught. And I have an example for you of a mom who submitted this. It's very simple. I just removed the name and the student ID. Would you mind passing these out? Thank you. It's important to know how simple it is that we're making it for people. It was also reported that our call center reps advised parents that starting next week, we will be eliminating supplemental materials without documentation. And that this category and all these purchases would require formal curriculum. That is 100% incorrect. I welcome any parent to please come and talk to me. And we would set up a time to be able to hear if that's what's happening, because that's not what we see happening in our office. We record every single call in our call center. We review most of them throughout the week as we go. We are training new staff, and that's definitely something we would never say that this is going away in the future. There was also a concern brought up as to why insurance and surety bond payments were added to the handbook. That was added to the handbook because it's part of the law and it has been for quite some time. This is not the insurance that one of the board members spoke about the last meeting. It's actually been a part of the law for many years, and it's ARS 15-2402 B4L. That's why it's in there. The pre-approvals process, we put back into the handbook. We certainly can do the continue with that for people's comfort, absolutely. But when you have 50,000 people, maybe 20,000 of them are trying to get a pre-approval, and at the same time, they're actually placing the order. It backs things up. One of the things that we're trying to tell parents is, if you place the order, it's not going to be denied. If you need something else, it would be incompleted until you provided it, unless it's on the disallowed list. We're just trying to make sure not only for 51,000, we are trying to make the work less. And I understand people who want comfort or pre-approval are happy to offer that, but we're trying to push it into the actual requirements. The list of approved therapies for students with disabilities was reinstated. The help desk with instructions were removed because the system that we use is broken and many parents know that. We're in the middle of changing the software out at the Department of Education and we wanted it to be accurate. So I reinstated it for now, but it will likely change before the handbook goes into effect for final, or even up for final adoption, because the new software in place that we're hoping to have in place soon could have to be a different process altogether. We're not sure. The IEP and IEP sections are being written by our special education department at the Department of Ed. And as soon as we have that language, I will be able to share it with you. I have asked them to write it because the new changes in the law regarding evaluations, it's really important this is crystal clear. I want parents to know where their child with a disability stands and the ways of protection, because once you leave the public school system, you no longer have federal protections and cannot be called a special education student. So that's coming soon, and they're bringing clarity to that with the attorneys, so they're writing. I can email that to you since it's ready. At the March 20th meeting, it was requested that an allowables list be put back on the website, and we did, as I mentioned, on March 17th. There was a request that receipts and reimbursements are paused as to be able to focus on allowable purchases for families. That's exactly what we're doing. In fact, as of today, we have 6,800 marketplace orders, 3,100 direct pay orders, 18,000 reimbursement orders, and 142,000 debit card transactions. For marketplace, we're doing this in chronological order now. We're at February 25th. For direct pay, we're on March 17th. Reimbursements, February 12th. And then the debit card transactions go back to July of 2021. We have primarily focused on reimbursements for the last few weeks to get those up to date where marketplace and direct pay are, because that's important. We don't want to pause any reimbursements because parents are waiting for those funds that they've already spent. However, we have paused looking at debit card transactions until we can tackle that in a special project. Now for the debit cards, the ever so popular debit cards. We paused brand new ones from being issued so that we can address the administrative problem that has gotten way out of hand. Our issues have come up with debit cards, and I have personally taken care of many of those who have been out of compliance. We had 750 cards without receipts between July 1st, 2022 and December 31st, 2022. And they were months past due on the deadline for turning them in. We notified them, and all but 230 quickly brought their cards back into compliance and sent us receipts. On March 13th, 230 cards were turned off. The previous administration definitely knew what an issue this was because the backlog dates back to July of 2021. So even with 13,000 students in the program, it was difficult. Now we have 51,000 and growing, and a solution has not been found. We are open to ideas. As you saw in the video that we sent you, it takes a lot longer to be able to reconcile a debit card transaction that isn't sent in properly than the other three methods of accessing funds. And those are the ones with receipts. Ones without receipts, a different story. At this time, if we just rejected the ones without receipts in our system, we would be chasing after a ton of money through a collections process that would come to you. Now, I know they are responsible to turn in the receipt, but I don't think we want hundreds and hundreds of accounts into collections that are almost 2 years old. We are working every single day to see how this might work best for account holders in the months and years to come. We have not found a practical way to be able to accomplish that yet, but we're open to ideas. Some of the other comments, we will review the wording on accreditation necessary for tutoring and teaching services to see if there's any inconsistencies. I was able to go through it last night, but I'll go through it again, because I know that was a written comment, I believe. We're also getting clarity from the legal team as whether or not, who exactly cannot receive ESA funds. We know the account holder can't for their own child, but as far as the definition of family or other people who can't, I want to give a clear legal definition and not yes. The end state for post-secondary education that's been mentioned a few times is not something that we changed. When I had changed it, and then when we went back to, after the last meeting, went back to the original handbook that you approved last April, it was in there. So the end state is still in there. I'm happy to change that because that's not clear within the law from the previous administrations and your approval of the handbook. That's not something that we changed. It's also been said that our administration is not, or that we are, excuse me, inappropriately regulating any home education for ESA families. We can adjust the wording of how we're wording it, but all families would need to submit their extracurricular and extra elective type curriculum to show materials as your handbook said from last year. This has been the case for years. It's not something that we're changing. We have a lot more home education paying parents in the system now. I think a lot of people think that the most complicated user of an ESA funds is someone who is special needs or disabled. And actually, I would say it's that group and home educators, both very complex spenders and use the funds more regularly. So now I want to jump into the account holder feedback. I won't go through the timeline that I did before as to how everything went, but if you have questions, please let me know. The allowable list, I'm going to just go through a summary of all the pages that I submitted to you. It's kind of a long summary, so stop if you have questions. The allowable list was desired to be added. We added it under supplemental materials. The disallowable list was desired to be added. We added it under disallowed spending categories. The categories in class wallet did not match the categories in the handbook. And now they do. They wanted it to change. So now they reflect the same information when we're choosing the category of spending. Consumables, that needed to change because of the law. And so that needed to be added and we did. The educational therapies for qualified students with disabilities, we restored that. Information for purchases for qualified students with disabilities, as I already went through that, we restored that as well. It was already in there, but we restored the original language, not including the qualified examiner that's in the law. Audit curriculum for qualified students with disabilities. This is under review at this time to find out more about trying to figure out with an anonymous survey, you can't tell who said that, so we're asking the other members. And we're checking with the class wallet agreement to see if the vendor list, the agreement that the person signed with class wallet can be made public. The moment we confirm that with the attorneys, it will be made public. Provide more information for special ed learners. We're reviewing that as well. Requirements for tutors as individuals in business as far as the billing. And we added that under tutoring and teaching services headline. In the heading, excuse me. Examples of curriculum. I am trying to do some general ones that are more, I would like to do the one that I presented to you and the one that's more larger, if you will. But again, we had to the book. Member Clark had asked to have the full law and the full rules, which added about 30 pages to the end. So if you want me to have more, I definitely could. The lifetime and yearly subscriptions, this was added under the heading, or other items heading. What I'm sharing with you is where we've seen multiple times things being asked. To make it clear what needs to be on an invoice because different invoices have different needs. So that is something that we added under documenting ESA purchases. Formal curriculum or really curriculum definition is under review because we took out the attestation or the enrollment part. And we're just looking for an overview, something that's the course of study is to be proved course of study. Clarifying classes at a facility or how tutors need to attest for physical education. So we added that under extracurricular activities. To clarify what qualifies as STEM or a STEAM box. I don't know that we want to put a full pages and pages in there, but we're looking for a better paragraph, so that's under review as well. And then clarification on credentials. So we will clarify that more based on what is unclear to those 4 users. A hyperlinks of index fast forward to the necessary chapters. As soon as this is completed, we will work with the department's webmaster. I don't know that we've hired one yet. I know that's open position to be able to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I think our first speaker today had difficulties, and I understand those difficulties with our website as soon as we're able to adjust that. There's some things I have control over and some things that the whole department dictates for the website. Clarification for for educational camps that are not overnight. They want to have something that's changed the way it's worded, and we're happy to do that. So we would say ESA funds are allowable for educational camps, but we're not paying for the lodging and food and things for things that are overnight or a few days. There was a word from the previous handbook, they wanted to remove the word standards for education. I hadn't even actually seen that in there, so that was removed. Getting rid of the attestation process for supplemental materials. I already spoke to that, which will be applied when they submit. Detailed how-tos for each payment type. We want to be able to do videos, and that's in Q2 and 3 of this calendar year. What we plan to do when we hire somebody to be able to do videos to make it more tangible for people who are good at reading a large document. Requirements for exited students. We're trying to put more verbiage around that because termination of a contract and exit contract seem to be confusing from previous years. MCC codes for the debit cards. We definitely can consider adding that after we look at whether or not the same MCC codes would be used. An explanation of withdrawing homeschool affidavit. That's under review by the legal team because once you sign an ESA contract, you're not supposed to just file a homeschool affidavit with your county superintendent, school superintendent. But the law doesn't say if you already had one on file and then you sign an ESA contract, if you're supposed to remove it. So this is an issue with some of the counties, and with our legal team is working on that. And then once we have that, we can bring clarity. There was a time frame on quarterly funding that was from the previous handbook that needed to be adjusted, and the extra month to turn in receipts after a quarter. I know that had been what the previous administration was doing, but the handbook didn't have that, so we added the extra month. Paraprofessionals, they stated that they should be allowed to also, paraprofessionals and educational aides for students with disabilities. Parents want them to be able to have the same credential as when they move on. So that's under review by the special education team. More information about debit card transactions and processes. So we're reviewing that, and we have another PAC meeting specifically on the handbook next Thursday, so we'll be talking about that. Instruments and educational materials section, that's added under supplemental materials. When do we call us wallet and when do we call it the ESA? We're looking to clarify that in an easy paragraph first beginning. The help desk ticket verbiage, we restored it for now, but again, it's probably going to change because of the new software that the department is purchasing. Parents want to be able to take a receipt and split purchases between siblings. So for an example, if you go to the zoo and you get, I'm just thinking of this, you go to the zoo and it's $40 for a family instead of individual tickets that might be more than that family. They want to be able to take the $40 and divide it by each of the children for each of the accounts. So we're reviewing that to see if it would be possible, the way these are submitted and processed through Postbook. Of course, the page numbers, we wanted that on there, and we definitely restored those. Is the formatting issue from the first submission. And then field trips, we added single tickets for educational events in the handbook. Finally, Department of Education, we are a service organization here. And the most important thing for us is that our parents have confidence and stability in this program. The accountability, I don't want to say it doesn't exist, it's there. It's important. It's not an either or, it's a both and that's important. So we are, one of the speakers that she noticed said, we're trying to make things more flexible and open for families to be able to use this program. That's the most important part to me, so that it's more accessible. When you're trying to clarify things, things come across more difficult, and it was never intended for that at all. So we are here to serve everyone, and I would be happy to answer any questions, but also let you know that we will be having the next meeting next Thursday.
Well, thank you so much for that, and I'm certain there are some questions for you. So if you want to just breathe deep for a second, we do have some written comments that were submitted by Board Member Clark. It was her specific request that they be read in open meeting, and I've asked Vice President Neely if she's willing to do that for us. I might give her a second to pull those up. And again, that was a request that, Executive Director Ross.
President Core, Superintendent, or members of the board, just quickly before we get to Member Clark's comments, I want to offer an extension to the department. So normally items are due to the board and simply at the beginning of the month for that month's meeting.
Sure.
That deadline, I believe, is like the 1st or 2nd. However, we can extend that if Executive Director Urso, if you could put the item in, but we can extend that revision, that draft of the handbook into the 13th. I think that gives the department 10 extra days, and then it also gives the public 11 days to review before. So I just wanted to extend that.
That would be great. Thank you, Executive Director Ross. That's great. Vice President Henley, are you?
Yes, thank you.
It's always nerve-wracking to read in front of class, so let's see how she does.
I'm nervous.
Yes, I know. Go ahead, please.
Super nervous. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaur, for this opportunity. I am reading prepared remarks on behalf of Member Clark. She was unable to join us today due to previously planned travel for work. All right. Dear fellow board members, I'd like to start by thanking you for being attentive to ESA parents and the challenges they have brought to the board's attention over the past couple of months. As we all know, parents have come out in significant numbers to express their frustration with recent changes to the ESA program and how changes have negatively impacted their ability to appropriately use the program. The government should always be accountable to the people. That is why it's imperative we acknowledge and address the concerns raised by ESA parents. ESA parents, many of whom have been utilizing the program for years, are the greatest source of knowledge about this program and how changes will impact their children. The amount of public comments received on the ESA handbook, more than I have ever seen, and she made a note to the reference at the March board meeting. Late comments from the February meeting were about 246 pages from 188 people. Handbook comments, which were 39, public comments amounting to 152 pages, and the March public comments for today's meeting, 133 comments amounting to 224 pages. Clearly indicates that parents are deeply concerned about the proposed changes to the handbook. Some of the repeated concerns raised by ESA parents over the last 2 board meetings and through SBE's ESA feedback email addressed include the following: lack of meaningful dialogue with ADE,
The 3 virtual ESA feedback sessions did not include opportunities for Q&A. Removal of the debit card for all new ESA families disproportionately impacts special needs, low income, and rural families. ADE's survey about the handbook and feedback on the program was not posted on ADE's website and was only open for 3 days over a weekend. This significantly limited the number of responses. The handbook did not incorporate parent feedback after initial sessions. The removal of references to the help desk in the handbook suggests that ADE intends to remove this resource altogether. Families have had their debit cards removed and not reinstated, even though the removal was due to ADE errors. Specifically, a card was suspended for not having a curriculum in place for an order from 2021. The parent pointed out the curriculum was submitted with the order. The ADE employee stated that they were instructed that no cards can be reactivated. A card was suspended because of a blurry receipt. The parent resubmitted a copy of the receipt. The ADE employee stated they were instructed that no cards can be reactivated. Additional points. Requiring all orders to have a quote formal curriculum with the scope and sequence is putting an undue burden on parents of special needs children who must home educate because many of these children are not always able to learn within formal curriculum methods. This is why they are taught at home in the first place. Some vendors require a debit card and will not accept a direct pay method. Prohibiting use of the debit cards therefore harms special needs families the most because many specialists and tutors fall into this category, and finding a replacement vendor is virtually impossible. Reimbursement takes too long and is not financially equitable. Requiring 504s, IEPs, IEEs, METs, etc. to list all required support items is unrealistic. These documents are not intended for this purpose. Asking doctors to write a special note to reflect needed items is also unrealistic. Specialists do not have time for this added burden. The removal of allowed, disallowed database of expenses is harmful to parents, especially new parents to the program. The removal of the database of allowed, disallowed expenses may explain the rise in help desk tickets. ADE phone representatives do not provide consistent advice. For example, one representative says X is okay with Y documentation. The parent submits what is communicated, but their order is denied for reason Z. Parent phone calls to ADE are not being consistently documented. When a parent tries to compare advice from Rep A with Rep B, they are told there's no record of their conversation with Rep A. Parents have expressed concerns that help desk tickets will be replaced with phone communication only. Parents communicated that this is concerning because phone calls have zero accountability. ADE reps have advised parents that, quote, starting next year, ADE will be eliminating the supplemental without documentation category altogether, and purchases will require formal curriculum. This explains why supplemental items are being removed from the handbook. ADE has communicated that supplemental items were being included with all routine items like books, but now they fear this is not the case. I would like to suggest the following updates to the latest draft of the handbook. These changes will allow parents to understand better how the program works and how to appropriately utilize their funds. First, tutoring teaching services. The accreditation documents required for individuals, facilities, and/or businesses appear to be inconsistently explained in multiple places, specifically on PDF pages 15, 19, and 20. Recommendation. Language must be consistent regarding accreditation. Same phrases should be used. Account holders should be able to clearly understand the different documents required for an individual who is providing services compared to an individual who is billing as a business. Point 2, Hiring family members. The guidelines around hiring family members appears to be inconsistent throughout the handbook. Recommendation. If the department intends to disallow any family relations, that should be clearly stated. The reference to ARS 38-502, paragraph 9 should be removed because it does not apply to the ESA program. Point 3, extracurricular activities, physical education, and educational camps. The categories and documentation requirements for expenses are confusing, specifically PDF page 23. There appears to be contradictions on this page and the tutoring teaching expense category, specifically PDF page 19. Recommendation. All contradictions should be addressed and documentation requirements should be clearly stated. Point 4, art supplies, physical education, sporting items, educational kits, and educational subscriptions listed under supplemental materials. No documentation is needed for these items. However, on PDF pages 4 through 25, there appears to be a contradiction when art supplies, gym equipment, and subscriptions for educational kits listed on PDF pages 26 through 27 are under supplemental materials which require documentation. Recommendation. All contradictions should be addressed, and per the current ESA handbook, additional documentation should not be required for supplemental materials. Recommendation 5. No curriculum should be required for supplemental materials needed for class. Proof of enrollment and a class supply list should continue to be adequate as the current program allows, specifically PDF page 86. The class or instructor takes place of the curriculum. No formal curriculum should be required, and no class or instructor will provide their proprietary curriculum. Recommendation. Remove the curriculum requirement for a student enrolled in a class where a supply list is also provided. The word, quote, formal is not part of statute nor rules and therefore needs to be removed. Additional, if parents type up their own curriculum, which the ESA director has told parents on several occasions, this should be specified in the handbook. Point 6. Debit cards. Recommendation, as listed on PDF pages 50 and 52, all parents should be allowed to request and receive a debit card for use. Point 7, tuition or fees at an eligible post-secondary institution. PDF page 8 and 23 reads community college as defined in ARS 15-1401, a university under the AZ Board of Regents, or an accredited in-state private post-secondary institution. The addition of in-state violates statute. ARS 15-2401, paragraph 4 states, eligible post-secondary institution means a community college as defined in section 15-1401, a university under the jurisdiction of Arizona Board of Regents, or an accredited private post-secondary institution. Recommendation, in-state should be removed to align with the statute. Point 8, inappropriate regulation of home educating ESA families in violation of ARS 15-2404, paragraph A. On PDF page 20, the handbook requires home educating ESA families to submit additional paperwork to justify supplemental materials. In addition to the proof of course of study and curriculum, it states, parent example, I am teaching my child the life cycle of a plant at home. The formal curriculum that I submit has the following items listed on the materials list: soil, seeds, water, container, gloves, hand shovel. ARS 15-2404A prohibits ADE from exercising control or supervision over homeschool ESA parents. Therefore, ADE should not require more than what statute indicates as required for supplemental materials, which is showing that items are required or recommended by the curriculum. requiring parents to attest in writing how they are using curriculum is overreaching and adds an additional layer of bureaucracy and control over home educating ESA families, not to mention more work for ADE staff. Recommendation: this additional requirement for home educating parents should be removed from the handbook. Point 9, help desk support has been removed. For pre-approvals or questions about purchasing specific items, the following language has been struck. Please submit a help desk ticket at http://helpdesk.azed.gov/contact the ESA office. PDF page 3 and PDF page 59. Recommendation: include information about how to submit a help desk ticket and to request pre-approval for items that parents don't feel comfortable purchasing due to a lack of an allowable expenses list. Additional point: telling parents to call the ESA office to request pre-approval and no longer use the current method of submitting a help desk ticket does not give parents a written approval that they can keep track of. Written approvals for purchases are important to ESA parents who often fear that they will have to pay back an item that ADE has pre-approved. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice President Haley, for reading those comments again. Those comments come from Clark. Do you have a written copy of those comments? That was a lot to digest in real time. Do you have a written copy of those comments?
Yes, and I addressed all of those points in my remarks.
Okay, very good. I just want to make sure you had that, and I appreciate that. At this point, I suspect there are other members who may have some questions or comments, and I would open the floor and see if that's the case. Please, member, I'll just go from the left down if that's all right. Member Kravickas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. I think it's really critical for us to remember that this is a brand new program, never before done anywhere. And as such, it's going to require constant iteration. The issues with the administration's program has surpassed, I think, four administrations. They're not unique, and it's not a criticism of any of them. This is a brand new program. We're going to constantly deal with new issues and iterate. And I think that's really important for us to all remember and show each other grace, including grace for previous administrations as well. I have a kind of random comment to make. In the handbook and often in testimony, we use the term special needs. I know that there are a lot of people who are more comfortable with that term, but personally, I believe every child has a special need. But that is very different than students that have diagnosed, documented disabilities, which is also what's reflected in statute. So I just want to throw that out there because I think it is a manual issue, but also it's just a personal thing for me, because special need you can't define. So I know it's a nice term, but you can't define. That's very different than kids who have documented, diagnosed disabilities on IEPs and 504s. There are a myriad of lots of issues that have been discussed, many of which I won't add to because everybody has had incredible comments on both sides. My concern has really been the process and the procedure that this has all come out with. It's been kind of rushed and hasty since the beginning of the new year. And it's the timing of it. Well, and I was reflecting, if you think about hundreds of government, federal and state government programs, oftentimes the statutes have very specific deadlines. The department has to do this within 60 days. They have to do that within 30 days. And again, this is federal and state. This is exactly why, because it's come out quickly. I think a lot of parents felt taken off guard. And anytime you do that in any government program, there's going to be significant pushback, especially one of this nature and this big. And I think the fix to that is more than just addressing all of the issues. I think we really need to think about how do we establish a more formal process, again, knowing there's going to be constant iteration, especially as we're now expanding, to your point. So how do we build a more formal process that everybody knows about in advance? And so nobody feels taken off guard. And I mean, I'm looking at some of our staff, we all know like statute will say application must be posted by this and parents have X amount of days to respond. And that's why those things are in statute. So these kinds of things don't happen. Because I think we also need to figure out how to rebuild trust. Because it's clear that the parents are a lot of the participants, I'll say, are frustrated and kind of distrustful of the process. So those are my general comments.
Member Kravickas, Vice President Haley, any questions or comments?
Sure. Just in general, thanks again for adding in the vendor information for section 3 and adding page numbers. That was so helpful. I appreciate you listening to parent feedback and for this opportunity for you to be here with us today. And also I commend all the many moms, dads, caregivers, and others that provided extensive feedback. Just in general, there's some like ticky-tack things, and I complained about this last year, making sure that when referencing Arizona Revised statute that it's stated in the proper way, including, the double S's when referencing specific citations. I brought that up last year. There's a few pages, I think it's on toward the end, it's where the word depart is used, but it should be department, I think page 48 and 52. Please make sure that things like footnotes, that it's properly stated throughout. There's a few instances where footnotes are struck within the document, but then they're included later on. And I just want to make sure I am correct in understanding you did address the post-secondary issue for a private higher ed institution, that it's not specific to in-state. Is that correct?
Dr. Garcia, that is correct. I'm just waiting for it in writing from the attorneys before it's changed.
Okay.
Because I don't want to change that portion of the handbook without some legal guidance to make sure that's what the law reflects. So if the legal department comes back and says, yes, it can be out of state, then I would remove in-state.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I just in looking at the rule as well as statute, specifically like in-state is not included in ARS, nor is it in our rule RS 7 to 1501-5. Just a couple other questions related. I think we've addressed this in times past. There was on page 9 of the PDF, or at least in page number 9, why was the comment number 5 deleted about parents' ability to request that an MCC code no longer be restricted? It was referenced later on that the parent could make that recommendation. I just wanted to make sure that just from consistency, Member Clark mentioned consistency throughout. There was a footnote comment that was deleted, and later with the language related to debit cards, a parent could make a request that an MCC code no longer be restricted. And then a question on, there was a comment related to number 7, I think a comment number 7 on page, again, on the PDF number page 9. A diploma is issued from a secondary or post-secondary or training institution. I guess a question that I have is what is meant by an accrediting organization? Could it be said instead an accredited secondary, post-secondary, or training institution? Another individual brought that up, that it's about an accredited entity provides the degree or the diploma rather than an accrediting organization that provides it. So just making that change of an accredited secondary, post-secondary, or training institution, I think might provide families some greater clarity. And then I know we brought this up in prior, particularly at the February meeting and last week. I think there's been a little bit of tension of accrediting versus credential. I think they are somewhat synonymous, but I think often individuals will say, I received a credential from an accredited institution. And so I know that there's a commitment to having synonymous language between statute, rule, and what the handbook states, but I think some are getting caught up in sort of semantics. So why can't we still use credential?
Thank you, Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, Member Haley. The reason why that was adjusted is not just to be in line with all of our language, but also because people were calling us, asking us the definition of credential. And so they would point to the laws and have to be accredited. And again, I don't speak 50,000 dialects of ESA, so I try really hard as I get those to be able to talk directly to that person to share that. So we thought it would be better to have it plain as the language is in the law and in the rules, so that we make sure everybody's knowing we're not creating something new called a credential. Now, a lot of the families that I've been talking to regarding that question were not on the program previous to the expansion. So I think that's the reason why the clarity was, we can use it synonymously, but then I would need to make note that we're using it synonymously.
I think that might provide some greater clarity, in which case in the definition section, perhaps you can include that, or even at the end when you have a full list of what all the different acronyms and different things you could say that these two words mean the same. And then just, I know that Member Clark iterated a number of different points around proof of course of study. Again, just class registration. Could that suffice versus having to attest? I think you mentioned that when an individual is making a purchase, you mentioned that there'll be sort of like a button one clicks and says, yes, I attest that, the curriculum I'm purchasing or the materials I'm purchasing are in compliance with the handbook, law, revised statute, rule. Is that correct? So they don't have to upload a new form?
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, and Member Haley, yes, that's correct. So that's no longer an issue. It's actually not a button, but it's a kind of written in red right next to the submit button. You don't even have to check anything. It just stands out real brightly, that statement before they hit submit.
A question that I have on page 35 of the PDF, it says, a quote, as a reminder, only children who are identified as a child with a disability by a public school through an evaluation are entitled to spend ESA funds or educational therapy or on educational therapies, ... My question is, does that need to be updated to reflect the private evaluation opportunity?
Dr. Corr, Superintendent, Member Haley, yes, it does. And that's the section that's being written by special education experts at the department.
Great. Sorry, I'm like going through my pages versus like the summary of comments that you made. And then let's see, you mentioned on page, I guess a general question, pages 39 through 41. There was a lot of striking of disallowed. I guess the question is why not continue to include those as specific examples for what is disallowed for parents to be able to quickly check and understand what is allowed, what is not allowed.
Dr. Corr, Superintendent, Member Haley, if you look at page 38, a more extensive list is there. And that's the reason why we struck rather than striking one line and not the next and the way in the order that it is, and we wanted to put in this particular order, alphabetical. So page 38 covers all of those.
And then the question I think is sort of top of mind. Could you provide some clarity on debit cards? So last meeting, it was for existing parents. Question is, will all families that are eligible to participate in the ESA program, will they be able to be eligible for a debit card in order to curate and customize the education for children?
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, and Member Haley. The right word to use of what's happening right now is that we've paused it because of the issues we're trying to get through. Out of the 51,000 in this program, 17,000 have cards, 16,000 actively use them. I only wanted to look when we got there at July 1st on, because that's this particular current fiscal year. And those are the 750 cards that had issues. We didn't look at the ones before the previous fiscal year. So that's kind of the ones I'm trying to manage those now. The parents that have serviced, last time I told you there were 4, as of today there are 6 that have called and said I need a debit card, and I've talked with them. The only one person who hasn't been able to purchase what they want in the other 3 ways is someone who wants to use something specific that's out of state that I'm working with them on, because they needed to know how the law works. It was an out-of-state school, brick and mortar, not online. So that was up at the northern part of Arizona. So it's not that the debit card doesn't work, it's just the situation doesn't work, even though they presented to me that I need a debit card because of this. So this school is in Utah and not in Arizona, it's brick and mortar. So that's another issue, but that's the only one that surfaced, that they were asking for a debit card for this specific use. So that's a different issue, but going forward, we are working hard to figure out what the right answer is for that. As a mom, the program for 9 years, I can tell you that debit card with Bank of America was really easy. And even when they switched me to Cosmo, it was easier. It's not that we're saying one is better than the other. It's simply the growing pains of having so many people in the program to be able to actually go back and look at all of these. We have just under 143,000 transactions that need to be reconciled. We are being staffed up. I'm almost at 43. I have like 6 more positions. And then we have 43 people, which I'm pretty quick for government. And we are looking at what we can do with that. I'm working on a project to try to get some volunteer hours that were offered to us to be able to get through some of that backlog. But going forward, I don't know the answer yet. Were you able to see the video that we sent regarding how long it takes? I just want to write reference.
The one that was sent like a month ago?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I think it's a couple weeks ago. Yeah. I just want to reference it. So I
A lot's happened in the last 2 weeks.
So direct pay, marketplace, and reimbursements take anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute to approve. Debit cards mostly take anywhere from about 10 minutes, I'll say. Sometimes it gets up to 15, sometimes it's 6 or 7, but typically it's a training issue, definitely, to make sure that the parent sends in the receipt that needs to come in. But even the ones that we have receipts for, you're getting the actual receipt that has a SKU number on it from a store. And if it's not a big box store or something, you have to call and ask for somebody to get on the phone. What does the SKU number mean? What does it represent? And the example in the video was Lakeshore Learning and how it's a couple $1,000s, and then we have to get on the phone, write down every single item, and then start looking them up. It takes a long time. So we can train parents to do it differently with the receipts they receive and the receipts they receive.
That's helpful. I think we mentioned in prior meetings, it is something that is obviously unique to Arizona, but it has allowed for families across our state to really benefit from the trust that our legislators have put in families, that they can control their child's education and lead in that. My last comment is, I think it's an incomplete paragraph. So page 55, it's the second paragraph is not complete. So the following section has been deleted. If remaining funds are spent using a class wallet, prepaid debit card, ... The remaining paragraph remains, but if you leave that if you delete that sentence, the rest of the paragraph doesn't make sense. So perhaps keep the sentence and then delete the vendor. So if remaining funds are spent using a prepaid debit card with the vendor, then you can, the rest, then the paragraph just doesn't make sense. And again, you know, the vision and the mission of all of this is to make sure that moms and dads, caregivers, and others that are stewards of their kids' education have the most clarifying information possible. That's it.
Thank you, Vice President Haley. Superintendent Horn, comments or questions?
Yeah, first I want to make a comment about the letter that said there was a lack of meaningful dialogue. Christina Curso has had within 1 week 5 meetings with everyone who wanted to come. Some of them in person, and some people could come by virtual computers. 5 meetings in 1 week, in addition to all of her other burdens. And I think there's been a very meaningful dialogue. She's responded to everything that's been asked of her. I don't think that's a fair comment to say there's a lack of meaningful dialogue. There's a lot of dialogue, and I don't know any administrator who could have ever done a better job than Christina Curso has done in terms of dialogue and listening to people and ignoring personal attacks on her and simply dealing with in a very calm way with the facts and reasons for things. I do appreciate getting a letter. There's a point-by-point letter, and I guess we already have a copy of that. Is that right? So we will furnish to the board and make public at the next meeting the point-by-point where we can accommodate changes that are being requested, or where we feel we don't recommend that and the reasons for it. Some other board members have made oral comments today, and I would request that they do the same thing for us. If there's anything in those comments that requests a change in the handbook, if they would give us something in writing, we would provide the board with point by points where we'd either say, yes, we do accept that change, or we don't recommend it, and these are the reasons. Up till now, as an illustration of meaningful dialogue, we made a number of changes that came from comments from the public, and then we got other people saying, I liked it the way it was before. So we try to make changes wherever we can to accommodate comments. And what I want to be able to do is, if we can't do that, if we don't recommend it, provide a rationale for it. And I hope nobody ever again says there's been a lack of meaningful dialogue, considering Christina Curso works 7 days a week. People in my department say she shows up at 6:45 in the morning. She works till after 5 every day during the week, and she's working on the weekends as well. And I find any attacks on her to be extremely offensive. And I hope in future dialogues we will stick to points that we will accommodate if we can, and if we can't, we'll give a reason for why we can't in our recommendation.
Thank you, Superintendent Warren. I'll move to our board members attending virtually. And Dr. Clay, for whatever reason, you are on top of Dr. Hagerman, so I will start with you. Dr. Clay, any comments or questions?
Good morning, Dr. Core and members of the board. I have my eyes have been open constantly, just weighing what everyone is saying. I have a couple of I have a question and suggestion, and then I want to share with you how I see this whole landscape. My question suggestion is this right here. I was looking at formal curriculum. I see that a lot of people have their own ideas and perceptions about how to deal with that. My question is, what does formal curriculum mean? And is there a template to follow? I understand that there's a need for accountability. As a administrator and prior vice principal, with my teachers, especially my special needs teachers, we had a simple curriculum map template where there was a column for supplemental materials. I mean, many schools use this method. It's very simple. It's not in-depth. It's just, this is what I'm trying to teach, and these are the things that I'm using to teach it with. And if there is some sort of very simple template that anybody can use, that anybody can understand, I think that would help for both sides. Simple, but I understand what you're trying to do. There's some accountability there. There's some learning in place. And also there's a time or an opportunity for additional support. Because when I look at a curriculum map as an administrator and somebody's using a certain type of material or an item, I can say, hey, have you ever thought about this? Not just for ESA to help, but for any organization, they can look at this document, very, very simple document, and say, hey, have you thought about doing this? Or I like that idea. The thing is, we have to continue to be a learning organization as a state or as an ESA or as an educational system, period. And we need to have opportunities where we can share what we have learned. Because I'm afraid of silos. If we silo ourselves, eventually we're not going to be able to sustain this. Okay, that's one thing. We need to make this work. And I understand there's going to be frustrations and perceptions. But we need to have the skill to work with that and listen to each other without becoming offended and without offending other people. My concern is there's a significant number of parents that have expressed their frustration, a significant amount. And my concern is that just like Superintendent Horn was saying about the lack of meaningful dialogue, I know that I've heard that we have gone back and forth and we have these opportunities or have these opportunities. My question that I'd like you to answer later after I finish is, these sessions, did they include opportunities for question and answer that was synchronous with meaningful dialogue? I just want you to think about that one. Know that with me, I see everything. I'm a systems thinker. So as we're making decisions that require a 360-degree view, and if we're only using a 270-degree view, is that going to make work? Anything we do is going to be flawed. We have to try our best to acquire the 360 view of any initiative or any situation before we start making big decisions and changes. Bringing outside educators, special needs educators, teachers, administrators to assist with clarification. And I'm also talking about people who are non-ESA, who have no attachment to this. These people need to be included too, because they have a different worldview of things. And the more information we get, the better our document is going to be. We have to come together for clarification and walk away agreeing to disagree. That means we need to take some time to look at each of these issues, and regardless of what is decided, it was put on the table, everybody saw it, we came to a consensus. We either agreed or disagreed, but we walk away agreeing to disagree. If there's no effective conversation regarding ESA, the system is going to falter and become extinct. The ultimate goal is that feedback drives the system towards the goal of sustainment. When we stop learning together, a general access to collective knowledge will slow or stop, and our system will start to fragment. And fragmentation of an organization occurs when the system fails to operate as a cohesive unit. Fragmentation stems from unawareness of our interdependencies on each other. And fragmentation occurs when parts of the system has either lost the ability to communicate across boundaries, formally or informally, and silos are created. My concern is that we're starting to have some silos here. If there's no conversation regarding the needs of ESA, the schools, the community, our ES system will falter and become extinct. So I want you to think about this, everybody. How is this ESA system working? Who is part of the system? We need to look at who's part of the system, and then does that system communicate effectively to all parts? Is our system misaligned? Misaligned means that we're not on the same page here. Is our system fragmented? And does the system realize that all parts are interdependent and equally important? And does the system provide effective feedback to all parts? Does the system continually realign itself through the feedback to achieve sustainability? My fear is that this is going to fall apart. My fear is that sustainability is going to be beyond our reach because we're not effectively communicating. If we do this ESA thing the quick way, we might not be able to sustain this. We have to have deep thought and conversation and feedback that validates all parts of the system, not offending anybody and not being offensive. I know I'm giving the 360-degree or the 1,000 feet view of what I'm talking about, but I'm looking at this, I have to stand back. And instead of looking at the details and the micro, I'm looking at the macro now. Our system needs to be readjusted so that there is meaningful conversation. Because I hear a lot of emotion, a lot of anger. And if this thing is going to work, we can either microwave it or we can slow cook it. Which one is going to be better? Which one is going to last? And we are the example right now to the nation. How are we going to move forward? Are we going to do a quickie? Okay, or are we going to have some deep conversation with the right people at the table? So those are my, I'm sorry it took so long, but just thinking about this, that's my view about what's going on. I want to learn more, I want to understand more, and I want us to understand each other and not, okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clay.
Dr. Core, Superintendent, and Dr. Clay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. To address a couple of your questions, I'm sorry that I can't hand this to you, but I will email it to you today. There was a simple example that a parent provided, very simple, that we can use for showing that course of study or curriculum.
Christine, let me just ask if, is it possible to share the document on the screen or so that the two board members there can see it?
So Jessica, what we can do is we will post that the handout that Christine passed out to the board materials as soon as the meeting is convened, and then we'll also send it out to all the board members and those that weren't present as well.
I understand. Just because we had an immediate question, I wanted a chance to put it on the screen, maybe.
Executive Director Ross, Superintendent Warren, President Core. I don't have this document scanned in right now.
I will copy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will take it up and I will scan it.
Okay, we'll get it scanned and added. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, so that's about the curriculum, the course of study. The sessions that we did, Dr. Clay, we had 5 sessions, 2 of them that were in person. I made a 15-minute overarching kind of statement clarification of what we were going to talk about. And then that 90-minute session was Q&A, back and forth dialogue. And even when one question wasn't understood by another, additional questions continued. So it was a great dialogue. And that was, the first one was about 26 people. The 5th meeting, the one that was in person, was about 90 people. It's a great conversation. As a side note, those who are personally critical of me, I don't take offense to that. But those same people in conversation met with me and then publicly said, thank you for the clarification, because now I understand where you're coming from. Now I understand what you're doing. And now I love the approach of this administration. And I probably heard that from about 15 people just that day, and then multiple conversations by phone and email. So a lot of the parents who are speaking up as they surface again, whether or not be a help desk ticket, a phone call to me, an email to me, I am talking to them every day. So I talk to no less than 5 different parents every day, no more than probably about 10. Doesn't matter if they disagree with me or not, or what they think of me, I still want to serve them, even the ones who are critical. Some are even here today. And I've met with them, one for an hour and a half, just this past Monday. The constant conversation is always happening. In the first week of January, I was invited to go down to Tucson last Friday to make a presentation. So I did. It was about an hour. I spent the rest of my time in Tucson meeting, well, I met with 2 schools that had questions about using, but meeting with parents, because I was down there present, about all of these issues. Parents who have been in the program a long time, parents who haven't. I just opened the door so that I can have a one-on-one in-person conversation, which goes a lot healthier than anything that's electronic or not. I totally agree with you when it comes to I left your 1,000-foot level overview. I think it's important. Communication is very important. Taxpayers, media, every single person in the state of Arizona was welcome to come to our meetings. And I would be having one once a month. We will advertise it and also go on Twitter and, social media, so everybody knows. So even in those meetings, we had a few taxpayers, some media, a lot online, a few in person when we did that. My door really is always open to every single phone call. And then the last thing I'll mention is, I agree with you on the oven and on the microwave.
Thank you. President Kaur, I just also want to say that I appreciate you and all that you're doing. I also appreciate the input of all of the parents. Somehow we are moving forward. It's going to be difficult and uncomfortable, but I appreciate all the emails and all the comments and everyone continually trying and aligning themselves. We're going to do this and we're going to make it work. Thank all of you for what you do.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. Dr. Hagerman, I appreciate your patience. Do you have any comments or questions?
Just a quick one, Dr. Kaur, members of the board. What I'd be interested in the next presentation is about implementation. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the handbook, but I'm interested once there is a handbook approved, what is the department going to do to make sure that their websites match that information, and what kind of training and support for staff to give the most consistent information out to try to implement the handbook as effectively as possible. So I'm just interested in what that implementation process looks after the handbook's in place.
Yes. Dr. Superintendent or members of the board, I'm really happy you asked that question, because once the handbook is finally adopted, we're going to take 2 different approaches. Yes, the website by then, I hope we'll be able to have everything consistent and updated for the department, but also I want to go back to what I had to do as an ESA mom when I first got on the program. And that is I'm not going to require it, but I was required to come down to the Department of Education and sit in a class for 2 hours to be able to have a full overview of the program, the handbook, and a lot of Q&A. So I plan to do that at least 4 times, 2 online and 2 in person. But I want to open up a large room so everybody can come down. Different times of the day because people work and things like that. But I really want to be able to have a healthy discussion, thinking about 4 hours a piece so that we'll be able to do that. If you have any other ideas, definitely.
Thank you. I would note that the requested example of a student prepared curriculum is on the screen. And again, as Executive Director Ross has mentioned, we distributed and posted and made available. I want to thank you for your presentation today, and I also, perhaps more importantly, want to thank you for your willingness to make the adjustments you've already made. I think what we're seeing here is the process as it's supposed to work. That may be frustrating and it may be time consuming to all of us, but let's get this right. Because as has been mentioned by my colleagues, the nation is watching. I'm often asked, do I support ESA? Doesn't matter. My personal opinion simply does not matter. We are charged with making sure that it works, and it works for parents, and it works for kids, and it works for Arizona. That's our charge. And I think what we've witnessed here today is the process working, right? board members, the public, the users of ESA, the kids, making their thoughts known and us being responsive. I appreciate the suggestion and applaud the suggestion made by Superintendent Horn of let's compile this in writing and then let's go point by point. Yes, no, not yet, but maybe let's, because we've done this. I've been on the board for 6 years. We've been doing this for 6 years and I lose track of what request has been made and where it's at. So I think that's not only an amazing suggestion in current time, but probably ongoing. If I could so ask for that. And my only other comment is, we do hear a lot about the little inconsistencies, right? And I think we do need to get those cleared up because it diminishes from the document as a whole. And then I will conclude with this, maybe a caution. I heard you reference the potential use of a volunteer or volunteers. I don't know the context of that, but my spidey senses got tingling. That didn't strike me as a super good idea. And without knowing the details, I would just urge you to move slowly with the use of volunteers to do the work that we're engaged in. So please, it looks like you want to jump in there.
I would love to, but I wasn't sure how much I should say. The volunteers are actually classified, and it's classified as employees that they would at no cost to the state would be doing this in a volunteer way. I know we have a contract with them, but I ended up doing that. So it's not volunteers from outside, it would be classified employees.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that concludes my remarks and I'll Member Kravickas, second whack at the piñata.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I really want to reiterate Member Haley's comments. I've been a parent from the outside trying to weigh in on legislative and regulatory issues. And I know how hard it is when you don't have a lobbyist reminding you of the deadlines and taking the time off from your job or your kids to come down and do it. So I really, really want to thank all of the parents who have taken so much time to be involved in this process and encourage you to continue to do so. And lastly, I'd like to ask staff to think about what is it that we have authority to do in rule to start establishing processes, because to Member Corr's point, this has been an annual thing, and it is an annual thing, but maybe we need to start putting some more, I hate to use the word deadlines, but timeframes, like changes to the manual would be, drafted this time, how many days we give for parent feedback, just that kind of thing. So this way there's no surprises every year. And we also know, and I think we may need to think about language that would allow for, I don't want to say emergency, but like emergent issues that maybe can't even wait for that year. Just a way that we have flexibility to deal with really timely things, but we have an annual standardized procedure that everybody knows ahead of time.
That's interesting.
Thank you, Member Kravickas. Executive Director Ross, bring us home.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. So just one quick reminder. So we will extend the deadline for that draft to the 13th. And then one request to the department outside of the handbook, just to reach out to us about that help desk ticket if there is a change coming. The documentation of those calls are vital to the ESA appeals, which the board oversees. And so we'd love to be part of that process moving forward. And as a reminder, our next board meeting is April 24th and we'll start at 9 a.m.
Well, thank you very much. Then it is with my gratitude for all on